afternoon, everyone. Welcome once again. My name is Fernando Parra, and I have the pleasure of serving as the director of the Institute for Family Business at the Craig School of Business, a comprehensive resource center for family businesses, as well as a nexus that helps us connect with our students. As part of our mission today, we are presenting this seminar to help family businesses learn more about governance and planning, succession planning, trust and estate planning as well, with the help of our wonderful speaker, which I will introduce in just a few seconds. But before I do that, I just want to thank everybody that is here with us today. I see that there's a few of our advisory board members, including Fred Reese, our legacy supporter, our founder as well, who has been with us for 30 years. Thank you so much. We also have the chair of our board, Sam Gail. Thank you, Sam, for joining us today. We have Liz McIlvain with manufacturing. For our CEO of, I lost the official name for 1 second, Liz.
Total Concept.
Total Concepts Enterprises, right? Thank you so much, Liz, for all your contribution and putting us, for helping us put this together as well. We also have Rob Katka, who is one of our wonderful supporters from Moss Adams, one of our biggest supporters of the Craig School of Business. Rob, thank you for joining us today. Am I missing anybody from the board? And then, of course, we have our friends, our community members. We also have some students, which I love. We have a few students from the Student Association. Welcome, Sinran. Anybody else that I'm missing from our Student Association? And if anybody wants to say hi, we do have some members. I see some second generations as well. I see Matthew Reese. Is that one of our second generations?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you for joining us today, Matthew. That's great.
Pleasure.
Thank you. I see Jasmine, Brandon as well. Brandon Young, I'm assuming that's a second generation. It's a third generation, Brandon.
Hey, yeah, technically third generation, yeah.
Third generation. Well, welcome to the seminar. Well, today I have the honor of introducing the Senior Vice President and Family Wealth Director of the Covington Wealth Management Group at Morgan Stanley. Gail Covington is the founder and managing partner of the Covington Wealth Management Group, who is responsible for all aspects of the investment process, the portfolio construction, and risk management. She has worked closely with C-suite and private equity executives and company founders, as well as their families and family offices, serving as a trusted advisor across market cycles and across generations. We're excited to have you, Gail. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with our family businesses and our family business community and our students. We do not forget that we will have two more sessions in this bootcamp, one next Thursday, the 22nd, and one the week after on Friday, July 30th. So the next one is on a Thursday, and the one after that is on a Friday. So if you have any questions during the presentation, I'll be keeping an eye on the chat so that I can moderate our conversation. And this is going to be a pretty interactive session. So we will kind of force you to answer some questions sometimes. I may volunteer some of you. And so just be ready. So let me yield the floor to our friend, Gail Covington. Thank you so much, Gail.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Fernando. And it's wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invitation to you and to the board. And it's just my pleasure to come. And this is not going to be a lecture. I want to make sure everyone is clear. I hope actually that this will be very participatory and interactive. And if it's not too much to ask, I would welcome and love it if everyone could open their cameras and be here. And I'm going to ask everyone at the right time to open their mics and feel free to speak up. And what I'd like to just do is pretend that we're in a classroom. And I know that some of you are students, so hopefully that feels right at home. And I'd like for everyone to pretend that we have known one another for quite a while, that we've been working together collaboratively, and that together we've all taken on a big pro bono project, and we're all going to dive in. And the work is to help families who have come to us seeking advice. And to get us started, I want to pose a series of rhetorical questions for everyone to consider. So here goes. The first is, why would a successful third generation business go belly up? Why would a family be forced to sell all of the assets of their business in an absolute fire sale? That's question number one. Here's another question. Why would a family business become over leveraged, meaning they take on way too much debt, they fully draw down on their existing credit lines, and become operationally vulnerable such that the family was forced to sell the business? And finally, why would the members of a family who are super wealthy and very successful, why would everyone choose to vacation separately during Thanksgiving and during the December holidays? So just something for us to think about. And for the next 50 minutes, we're going to dive into the underlying factors that are at the root of these very unfortunate outcomes. And here's how we're going to conduct our time together. I believe that if you are curious enough to sign up, that you have some perspective, and we value that contribution. And I believe everyone has something to say. So this won't be a lecture, but it is about how we learn from one another. So let's have that conversation. And everyone should know that I attended a business school where if you didn't speak up, you got cold called, and I could resort to that. I don't want to. So please, everyone, just jump right in. And again, if anyone who's off camera would like to come on camera, please feel free to do that. So what's the goal here? The goal and the intention is to raise awareness and to inspire courage. And I use the word courage because wading into difficult conversations does take courage, and it takes courage inside families, and it takes courage inside businesses. So that's our goal. And to set the tone, I want to create a hypothetical and walk you through. So it's kind of a case setup, okay? And it's the facts that I hope everyone will think through and listen to. It's not hard. It's not, there won't be a test, but it will give you some consideration. So consider a third generation closely held business, and it was started by a grandfather and grandmother who in the mid 60s set up this business that went on to be wildly successful. The grandparents are now in their early 80s, and they're still working, but they've cut back a bit in a more limited way. They raised their 3 children, and their 3 children are working in the business. They are officers, and they are running various divisions of the business. And those 3 children have children of their own, but these younger children are range in age between 20 and 30. Right, so that's the family, that's the business set up in the 60s. Grandfather, grandmother are slowing down a little bit. They've got adult children and a few grandchildren that are working in the business. There is a board, and the board is made up of all family members. And there are dozens of very, very loyal employees that have worked at the company for decades. In terms of the company financials, the company does about 100 million in revenues and distributes annually about 5 million in dividends to the family members. And let me just mention something about the holidays. Increasingly, it has become a struggle, a real struggle, to get all the family members to attend Thanksgiving dinner. So now you've got the case, right? We're setting this up. And now I want to open up the discussion, right, and invite your comments. So what is this thing exactly that we call family governance? Right? Who would like to go first? How about Rob?
You have to exercise your prerogative, I think.
Oh my God, you're going to make me cold call.
It looks like it. So
Oh.
much for leadership.
Well, how about if we do Rob, then Sam, and then we'll do Brandon. How's about that? And then we'll do Simran. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, Rob, you're first.
So I would describe family governance as having a family unit that is making the organizational decisions for the business.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like it's comprised of a couple of generations.
Mm-hmm.
So they're the ones that are driving company policy, company direction, strategic initiatives,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that.
Great. Thank you. And Sam, how about you? What would you say?
Well, you described 3 generations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would mean there's probably a high level of chaos. There might be a member who attended the Kellogg School of Business Governance program and got exposed to John Ward and some of his stuff
Mm-hmm.
by then, by a 3rd generation.
Sure.
And trying to explain to the 2nd generation that there needs to be a little more order, a little more sustenance, right, if you want to call it, to the board meeting.
Sure.
You'll hear phrases like, well, your grandparents and us built this company from scratch and we walked through the snow and blah, 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 blah. And they would say, yeah, but you weren't accused of being a silver spooner either, so you didn't have to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
So the issues are a little bit different at the board level. And the root could be the educated and uneducated in terms of board governance, and then educated and uneducated in terms of the business, just the daily business. So
Thank you.
that could be the tone. And if they're all family members, that's probably what you're gonna get.
Thank you, Sam. So some other thoughts. Brandon, how about you?
Sure.
Tell me your thoughts about what we call family governance.
I think both the previous Sam and Rob had it perfectly right. I think Rob was very succinct, and I think it's the members of the family that are essentially in control, that make the decisions and set the direction for the company.
Exactly. No, thank you for that. What we've done is to start sort of wide, kind of an open aperture approach to naming and defining what family governance is. And, from my experience, I like to think of it as management approaches with a risk management overlay. So a set of risk controls that are really about ensuring the viability and the ongoing participation by the family in the business. And why in particular would family governance be important for this specific situation? And I think next I was going to call on Simran. Would love to hear your thoughts, and then would love to hear from Erica and then Giovanni.
Okay, so I think this particular topic is important because in family businesses, my parents have a business they started recently, and from what I know, I don't really know much about this, but from what I know, I think the roles that every individual in a family have within the company,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of outlines like what everyone stands for, and it kind of brings like throughout the years, if the company leads into 2nd or 3rd generation, it causes problems, as like the previous members said about like what people value, and then what you were talking about, how it's hard for members to get together on holidays. Maybe it's the fact that someone might not, have, maybe there's a jealousy factor where it's like, oh, you have a better position than I do. What did you do to deserve this position? Or I'm not really sure, but that's how I see it, how like many family businesses can kind of lead into future problems with just the status of everyone within the organization.
No, I think you're spot on. Thank you, Simran. And Erica, share some thoughts with us. What's coming up for you here?
So I think family governance is important within like having our own business, just so that like everything is clear, because it's not always going to be the same roles that we have within our family that we have within a company. So maybe some people like someone had said earlier that like maybe it's educated versus uneducated, and maybe like the newer generation is going to school, and there might be like turmoil between that, like where maybe the roles within the family, it's someone that's different than the higher roles within the company. So I think it's very important to just like draw that line to make sure that just because someone is in charge or it has a higher position within the business, that doesn't mean that they're not like in governments of the family.
Sure. No, definitely. It sounds like you're at the core of what you're talking about is what is equity and what is fair, right, between different family members, and what happens if one family member or family members are differently educated than the rest, right? Giovanni, I saw you there. Tell us your thoughts. Why family governance be specifically important in this situation?
Yes, so I don't know a lot about this, but what I do know is that the family governance is important because we need to be organized in a family business. And if there is a lack of succession planning, meaning that maybe there's family conflicts, or maybe grandma and grandfather had this vision for their business, and their kids followed along, but now the grandkids, they're looking to do something else with their lives, and maybe that's why they're gonna have to sell the business, because their grandkids don't want to follow that example or that business.
Definitely. Thank you. Here's another question, and this is a question about human capital, right? And if we could just think for a second about what this term means, human capital, what is it, and how does it relate to a business, right? And let me call on Matthew. I would love your thoughts.
Thank you. Human capital, depending on where the company is at in its, its company life cycle, right? Startups, depending on the amount of innovation and technology that's been invested into the business, human capital will always be ultimately the most valuable resource. Your staff, your team, your family members, every organization, company has their own different ways of describing, but being able to be an attractive business to entice people, be willing to make sacrifices. Ultimately, that scenario of the $5 million dividend, is that taking away from the incentives and the bonus structures and the reinvestment into the business to be able to ultimately get people to work. I know a lot of everyone, other people here and other businesses in the area, not just with COVID, what is the hack that everyone's trying to figure out, or one of the major issues across the country, not just the Central Valley, is labor. Mm-hmm. And it is unskilled, high skilled, corporate. We've seen an influx of people from, Bay Area, Southern California, and wanting to move to the Central Valley. But, human capital is ultimately is a driving force in the success of any business, unless you just have a sweet spot of high margin, low head count. But, one thing I was going to add about the holidays is something that makes it definitely difficult to get everyone together, Gail, is in-laws. I think back with governance, so much of it is having reasonable expectations and guide rails that lay everything out to where everyone can know kind of what the parameters and expectations are from them. And just like with planning holidays, it's very hard to get everyone together every single Christmas, every single holiday, and planning ahead, just like anything in business, is usually your best move. But human capital. Most people, when you're starting up a business, you have a service or a product, and people like you. They like working for you. And so that transitions, the family has to make sure that they hire the right people that can have the trickle down culture that starts with the family all the way down to your essential worker or entry-level position.
Thank you, Matthew. You said a few words that I thought were super interesting, and I'd love a couple of reactions. You used the word, the importance of labor, and you talked about protocols and guide rails, almost like boundaries. Let's see, who would like to offer a comment? Joanne, you have any reaction there? Joe? No? Okay, all good. Let's see. What about Fred?
I think Matt really did a great job of, explaining what human capital is, because human capital is the essence of every company, and the human capital drives the success or the failure of the company. So it's key, and it's like a fine machine that it has to be oiled, and it has to take care of it, keep it running smoothly, make sure that all the parts are working, and on and on. So human capital is very, very important in any organization, but it's probably more important in a family business to some degree.
Definitely. I see Terry. Hello, Terry. Nice to see you. I see you shaking in agreement. Do you have a perspective here?
Absolutely. So when you think about the value, if that company needs to be sold, the human capital is absolutely one of the biggest leveraging value proposition. So as Fred was just saying, and I think Matthew and almost everyone else, was that, if you don't have, number one, how can you go on vacation if all the human capital goes with you? So that's one reason why it has to be a going concern, unless you close down for, all of the holidays. And it is essential for the business to continue, because it's not just about one of us or, the top tier of the family. It's really making sure that it continues whether we're around or not.
Absolutely.
So if we essentially invest in that human capital, non-family members, let's say, or those essentials, it's a huge valuation of that business.
Absolutely. Thank you, Terry. I just to kind of pull a few threads together, this has been an incredibly difficult year for most. We all went home someplace, we all went indoors, and the value of people in organizations who not only had to continue to do their jobs, figure out how to get wired and have connectivity, not to mention managing children and family and parents. It's been absolutely trying and difficult. And what we know, right, which I think has been a surprise, is that people have managed to become really, really engaged and to stay productive and to do their jobs, which really brings into focus the importance of people and that human capital. Never before have I heard more employees focus on mental health and the awareness of mental health and how everyone is doing and faring right now in this incredibly difficult time. So completely agree. Matthew, Fred, Terry, thank you for your comments there. Here's another question for everyone. What does it mean to establish trust inside families, and how important is trust in the context of a family business? Thoughts? Perspective? Fernando, I haven't called on you yet. I know you're on the road, but that's not going to excuse you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, trust is everything, right? In a family business, we got to be able to trust whoever we are partnering with in the same business, typically, and especially when it's all about family, right? Can we trust that not only we can confide in or rely on the individuals or our family members to make sure that they will get the job done, but they will do it in the same with the same motivations that we will have as part of the family business, right? And that they will share that same social emotional wealth that we try to that we often get from our family business. As you asked, why would we over leverage our business? We would definitely do that because we want to make sure that we are not just fighting for the moment, but we're fighting for the legacy that we are trying to build. So trust is everything. Without trust, you don't have all the benefits that a family business enterprise will bring personally and family.
And just a follow-on question for either Fernando or for anyone else. When a business is created, is trust automatic? Is it a given that it's embedded in the values and the operating principles for a company?
Trust is earned. I think we earn it, and we earn it as we're mentoring our employees, our family members. We are working on developing that trust in both directions, right? We are making sure that we can trust them with assignments. And so, as you can see, one of my nephews is joining us today. And so little by little, you trust them to take more and more responsibilities, just like you would trust any other member of your extended family in your business. And so that is definitely earned, but it also has to be carefully fostered, if you will.
Definitely. Sam, looks like you might have something to say about this topic.
Yeah, let me turn my microphone on. Trust is the foundation to all relationships, whether it's personal or business. So, trust is also measured on a continuum of low to high. So, to give an example, you're a family member, you're part of the inner team, you're the CEO. And if you come in and you only say good morning to people, then your trust level is only going to be superficial. You say good morning, how are you feeling? Your trust is going to be kind of intermediate. You move up the scale or the continuum to high. If you come in and you say good morning, how are you doing? And what can I do to help you succeed today? Then trust is going to go even higher. So, your language, your communication has a lot to do, and then your actions, of course, have a lot to do with trust. And I smile a lot because I smile. You either cry or you smile a lot, right? And I smile because I've been in the family business, both as an employee and as a family member. And then, as a consultant, I spend a lot of time with families. They're all different. And they all have a different trust level, and the trust level between family members is different,
Definitely.
So trust is big. Trust is foundational. Yeah, sure.
I couldn't agree more with you, Sam, and it actually threads together what Fernando talked about, which is that it's not a given and it has to be absolutely earned. And thank you for that really great example about the difference between a good morning and really leaning into someone's situation and offering to help. What happens if opportunities for education within a family are unevenly distributed due to lack of interest, due to lack of motivation, or due to addiction?
Yeah, I was going to talk about that, Gail. It's kind of piggybacking off of the trust is, really just I'm a firm believer in Peter's principle, and, I might not have it right, but, people should not go above and beyond their skill level or what their ability is to contribute, and understanding the roles and champion each other, for the skill sets that you have. You might have a family member that, they might want to come in and operate a machinery line or be a forklift operator, and they can add a lot of value to the business, and by the interactions that they have with their team, the pride that they have, and just understanding the business, and building camaraderie. And it's when, nepotism, leaning more towards opportunities that family members would not have in other ways of employment, is the path, rather than nepotism, where that's what can cause, extreme, deceit and just issues, poor relationships, and lack of trust, if those opportunities can come out. And that's where the family dynamic will always be the hardest thing, because sometimes the people that are passing things down, it's hard to tell what somebody's going to be like when they're, 15 to 30 years old, and people change. And so, it can turn really quick, but that goes back to governance and guide rails and job, prerequisites before, in education and experience of managing people, outside work experience, all those things. Setting those parameters early is what can protect all that.
Absolutely. The word guardrails comes back again, and the word protect. Brandon, do you have a reaction here? I think you're on mute, Brandon.
Oh, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
So you're still kind of talking about trust, right? As sort of the
well, part of the question was also what happens if opportunities for education have been unevenly distributed due to lack of interest, lack of motivation, and or addiction. And just curious if anyone would offer a comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be obviously a very family specific answer, right? For us in particular, there wasn't a whole lot of variation between the generations. My parents and their siblings, them being the second generation, they all sort of follow each other in the same footsteps generally, of college, and then coming home and working for the family. And then my siblings and I, in fact, all our cousins, very similar as well. There's some aberrations, some that decided not to, but I think it at the core comes down to the family being flexible and caring enough for each person to be okay with the fact that it's not the right path necessarily for each family member, especially as you go through the generations, right? The family tree just starts getting more and more, and the probability is going to be higher and higher that there are family members that it's not the path for them.
That's right. That's right. Some are going to just opt out for their own personal interests. They may or may not have the skills. It may be that the family business can't just hire everyone, right? What you're saying.
Yep.
Any other? Does anybody want to touch the topic of addiction?
Yeah, Courtney, we get into this question and sometimes I want to go to the solution, right? And in this case, I can't help myself. But when it comes to education, of the family members. It should be no different than your educational policy. What, you know, and it's a personal decision. So education would never, in my world, never be would never be exposed to the business from a family perspective. It would be a family decision. It'd be my son deciding whether he's going to go to college or not whether or not he's in the business and he goes to college because dad's the president and he sends him to college and the company pays for it. The educational, to me, the educational governance or policy should be the company policy for so everybody benefits from an educational perspective. If you can't afford one, from a company perspective, you can't afford one, but it's still a personal family decision with mom and dad, whoever that is, an individual. So I had up against education being an issue, run up against addiction being an issue. And addiction is a big one because there's a bunch of different ways you can be addicted, things you can be addicted to. And I'll leave it at that because the next speaker can probably talk to those different types of addictions, but sure, absolutely.
Thank you, Sam. Is there agreement that addiction is really game changing for a family, right? And suddenly you have someone who may be fully functioning, suddenly not able to participate, and families are faced with really exceptionally hard decisions that takes someone out of the running, sometimes for even participating in the business, or even financially participating in the business and dividends because they don't exhibit the personal behavior, they're not able to, they have an illness that just makes it extremely difficult, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
Terry.
and Courtney, this is Shane. Real quick, this is Shane again. I stepped off a board of directors because of addiction.
Okay.
One of the owners, one of the board members was addicted to alcohol. And I wasn't willing to put my reputation or the risk of fiduciary, issues
On the line.
in the hands of an alcoholic.
Thank you, Sam. And
it makes a difference.
What you are raising is the issue of how addiction hurts the business. It hurts the leadership, both those that are part of the family, but also those independent outsiders who would otherwise lean in and be part of the board, for example. And Terry, it looked like you had something to say as well.
Also, there's liability that goes along with that for the entire company, especially if you're an employee. And it's not just addiction; it could be mental illness or other incapacities, dementia.
Yes.
I work with a lot of families that have all of those assortments. So you have to have a plan of action, and that's why family governance is important. Not to pick on anybody in particular, just saying this is what we're going to do if this occurs. So we all agree. And these are the tools that we have in our toolbox, and it'll reduce resentments. It's going to be hard no matter what, but maybe there's opportunity to have the family pay for ways of managing those things, whether it's counseling, etc. So having it not as because it is an illness, it is a disease. And if we look at it that way, it would be like any other difference in ability.
I think the other thing too, Terry, with planning for these things is, especially like in third and fourth generation family businesses, sometimes second, depending on how much capital and cash flow is created and wealth, is estate planning. Estate planning is a very important factor to these kids will become trust fund kids, but are they going to act a certain way? But giving these guide rails for them to reach a certain level of maturity where, to Sam's point, alcoholism and things like that, people go through stages, loss, trauma, mental health issues, but it allows for an action plan to work on these things right away. And to Sam's point, you treat education, careers, jobs, just like any other team member, and that's how you can automatically gain trust. But the estate planning is a major factor to where you can have parameters set up where, you know, these kids aren't going to come into a large amount of wealth. They might have, you know, some trustees, aunts, uncles that can maybe help, or business associates that might be able to help. So it's not your parents raising you as a 35-year-old opioid, you know, the addict.
That's right.
It's and so estate planning it's the other part of being a family business or family business owner. One of the roles and responsibilities, if you don't do it yourself, you're gonna be paying somebody a lot to help you with those services. But on the flip side, it kind of sets these guide rails pretty early for these kids to understand it, and then they can just go off and follow their passion and find their purpose, which hopefully doesn't lead them down those paths.
Definitely. Matthew, thank you for that. Two things. One, the third session that Fernando talked about, I'm going to actually come back and do a conversation on estate planning. You've got a veritable expert here with Terry. This is part of her work. So very delighted to have Terry here for this conversation and for others. And for those of you who may not be aware, inside most trusts, if they're drafted properly, there is what's called a spendthrift provision that is a way for families to protect a scenario where someone is not in a position, either through personal behavior, through addiction, etc., to really use the standard of care that's necessary with distributions from a family, a trust. And so let me just ask one more question before we keep going. What are some of the key risk factors for a family who lacks a strong family governance set of protocols? What are the key risk factors? Yeah, Terry.
The ability for the company and the family to continue. You know, it's absolutely pivotal. If you don't have a good governance and plan of action and tools we just talked about that Matthew mentioned, we're out of luck. It's not going to happen. It's going to force a sale, and it'll be a sad day.
Absolutely.
Well, everyone's heard those scenarios of, like, you know, going to your different parent to get the piece of candy, and if you don't have the worst thing is you have the family members not having the same goals or agenda, and then, you know, somebody on the executive team, human nature might kick in. They might start playing games. Okay, so Joe grew up in marketing. That's where he, you know, got his experience. So I'm going to go with him whenever I need to drive this initiative in the business. But just, you know, instead, well, let's not let Karen, you know, she's going to say, she says no to everything. And so getting that alignment on everything is so key. But, you know, I mean, especially with COVID and successful business, they make smart, sound decisions fast, and they react. And it's like, if you got to go through, you know, every little thing, you know, it's going to be a nightmare for your non-family, you know, employees, team members, you know, partners. So it's just, you know, building consensus and allowing, and that ultimately is what can create trust. Going back, is you're giving a little bit of what your ultimate goal might be, but you're supporting, you know, a consensus or a compromise, which naturally has the trust building elements if everyone can agree.
Yeah, and I had a couple of thoughts coming to mind. I think if it's not clear what the governance structure is and what everyone's role is, and everyone's on the same page, then it's going to breed resentment, you know, between the family members. And I think ultimately that's probably a key reason a lot of time what leads to what Terry was saying, which is the company just having to dissolve and everyone go their separate ways, is, you know, the relationships between the family members dissolving. And then the other thing, and Matt kind of touched on it briefly, but super important, if you're in a family business with many other employees who are not in the family, if the relationship and the governance structure is not clear, and the relationship between the family members is not good, then it definitely is not a good situation for non-family members in the company, because they sense that that kind of issue, for sure.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more with you, Brandon, and you, Matthew, as well. And I appreciate those perspectives. And it sounds like you didn't come to those perspectives overnight. That comes from experience, and I really appreciate you sharing. And let me just pull some of what we've been talking about for the last few minutes together, and really address what I think are some of the real, I guess, brutal facts about family businesses, and in particular, why they fail, why those family members, and this is back to the question about why don't folks want to get together and go on vacation and spend time for Thanksgiving, and why, is it that things are falling apart and the family business is over leveraged and needing to do a fire sale. Typically, the biggest reasons include, number one, poor succession planning. Number two, too few third-party advisors, family conflicts and different visions among generations, ill-prepared next generation leaders, and poor strategic planning. And I think that is really woven through a lot of what we've heard. And it's really not a wonder that just an estimated 12% of family businesses remain viable to that third generation. And that's according to the Family Business Alliance. And there was a Deloitte survey that showed that more than 40% of closely held family businesses have zero succession plan in place. And this gets directly to some of what Terry was talking about. Matt brought it up, and it really just is super important around how families lead and how they protect the legacy and protect the franchise and the enterprise value that they've worked so hard to create. So absolutely. I want to just now take us to look at just a couple of summary slides that I think really bring some of this together. And again, this is not going to be a huge PowerPoint, but I do want to just wrap up and come back to something that we talked about a few minutes ago, which is really about human capital. And for many clients with families with closely held businesses, the most difficult wealth planning exercise they face relates not to the money, not to even the capital itself, but really to that human piece. For many clients, their most daunting challenge involves managing the mix of issues that are related to the impact that the wealth has on their families. And so what are the fears? Many closely held business owners fear that family members will become overly dependent on wealth created by others, that the family will be really damaged, a intractable fissure, if you will, damaged by family conflict, that the wealth management structures, so to the point that Terry made and Matthew made about trust and estate planning, those generation skipping trust and dynastic trust that were set up 2 decades ago, that those actually might be dismantled by beneficiaries because they don't have enough vision about core values to sort of think about keeping those trusts together. And back to the topic of education that Sam talked about, gaps in financial knowledge will undermine the understanding, the communication, and responsible financial behavior. And what are the ramifications? The philanthropic vision or that legacy will break down, and it will not be the same vision that the grandmother or the grandfather put in place, and that there becomes a fight to the death over the wealth, whether it's power or control, and the wealth can lead family members, particularly 2 and 3 generations down the line, to engage in self-destructive and sometimes self-coping behaviors, right? So for sure, all of those things, elements are there. Let me just mention what the opportunity is. The opportunity is to create what we call a purposeful family environment. And there is something here that really weaves thematically through this entire conversation. whether it's what Terry or Brandon or Fernando or Matthew mentioned, but we've said over and over again that establishing family governance structures becomes super, super critical. And at the high level, we may be aware of what that is, but there's also the micro level of digging in. There's family mission statements. There's advising on how to create enduring family legacies. There are documents, including things like bylaws and family constitutions. There's such a thing as a family council where you invite members from different generations, right? There are also ways to really think about communication, and families sometimes talk to each other and they have no problems talking and even yelling at one another, but facilitating effective communication is an art and a skill, and often requires an outsider come in, a neutral person who has no stake, if you will, and is not sitting on the board. And this is around structuring formal meetings, addressing kind of where there's conflict, helping parents to have perspectives about even their own parenting approaches, around stewardship and responsibility. I can't tell you how many young folks who have come up wealthy don't have some of the very basics of how to be independent, such as how to buy a car, how to think about a mortgage, how to live independently, and importantly, they're missing confidence and self-esteem. The personalized financial education. So when you have gaps in a family of education, you are missing the ability for someone to appreciate what it is that the grandparents or the founders really worked so hard for. In my own personal experience, some of my most important lessons that I watched from my clients were those who were actually really driven by their faith, and their faith enabled them to be generous and tied to their faith institution, but at the same time, they were really, really clear about giving their children just enough so that the children knew the value of what the grandparents had worked so hard for. And it did not mean that the children were trust fund kids. It meant that they had just a little bit, but the expectation was really clarified by a family council that everyone needed to have a job, everyone needed to go to school as best they could. Family dynamics and legacy. So this is where you really address the Thanksgiving and the holidays and what happens if there's conflict, and often getting really a family therapist to come and do retreats and do sessions. But there is help, and there's experts available who really will help to dive in and harmonize the dynamics within a family. And then lastly, there are the strategies, and this is where families really rely on domain experts in the financial side, the trust and estate side, to really create tax advantage strategies that are going to ensure the legacy. Sometimes, for example, creating different types of trusts for income versus principal beneficiaries to take money out, and then protective provisions that are really the safety and the guardrails to make sure that that the family and the assets stay intact. And then let me just share a little bit more about what I mentioned earlier, which is mission statements, the governance structures, the meetings, the retreats, the enhanced communication. Learning to communicate is very different than having dinner together, right? And how to create business plans and advising on the right structures. So what happens if the biggest asset has been just the business? Does it need a family office? Or are there other structures that are appropriate? So all of these things come together to build an approach, a curriculum of if you will, that is in support of the family governance. So let me just take this off for a second. And in terms of what we see as really the top 4 best ideas, best practices for families who are thinking about good governance. The first is to protect the franchise, right? Which is strong financial controls. And I'll use a word that 25, 30 years ago wouldn't have been on the table, but strong financial controls. And today it's cybersecurity, right? If, for example, there is a major breach, and we've seen backdoor breaches of data, it rips a hole right through the core of a business. If a family has a very large enterprise and suddenly there is a ransomware attack and the family entirely is held hostage and needing to pay to get release of data, to get release of assets, a family's dynamic can break down very, very quickly, particularly the person who was overseeing and running or managing IT. Second, formalizing that good governance policy and framework and structure, establishing a very, very well-functioning board of directors that includes both family members and independent directors. And then lastly, putting together a strong and a thoughtful succession plan that brings in outsiders, gets outside perspectives, and does so carefully over multiple years for that next generation, and again, to have that smooth transition. So we are just about out of time, and I really want to thank everyone for their thoughts and perspectives, and I hope everyone got a little something out of this, and I really want to thank you for your contributions. And Fernando, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to close up and to say.
Absolutely. I'll first start by releasing a poll just to get your feedback, and then opening up the next 15 to 30 minutes, depending on your questions. But we plan for 15 minutes of questions if you like to bring this conversation a little further. So let me go ahead and launch that polling, and you should be seeing it on your screen. One of the questions that I always get in terms of governance is, what are the things that that should be part of your governance that you should never miss, right? You know, because governance can be really structured in such a way that is inflexible. We see that family members do evolve. We mature throughout time. We learn from our mistakes. We learn from our family members, and you know, generations get more interested as time passes by. You may have individuals that may not be interested in a family business at first, and we often recommend that they go in and, you know, work for somebody else so they can bring a different perspective to a family business, right? So you're not always protected by the bubble. And so, in your opinion, Gail, how do we make sure that those governance structures are set so that we can accommodate that growth in our own family? And I mean that not in the number of members, but in the maturity level that all of us acquire throughout time.
Sure. No, I think that's a great question. You know, every family situation is going to be different. I think the key is flexibility, but I also think that any governance documents have to start with a vision and a view and a perspective, and they have to be grounded in the core values of that family, whether it's the founders, whether it's the second generation. But there should be agreement together as a family that is deciding, especially if they're going to codify principles in a document, and they're going to then have a council or a set of bylaws that are really going to help to set out those parameters. I think they need to contemplate different scenarios and have built-in flexibility, but lead with a set of values. But how you lay out governance documents is not going to be how you operate the business, right? So this is going to be really much more at a high level. But I would say that they have to be broad enough to accommodate the changing number, the changing ages, the changing roles of the family. I'll give you an example. What happens if you have 4 children in a family? One goes to art school, one becomes a professional musician, and 2 stay working in the business, and you want to be fair to all 4 children for their contributions, right? How do you address that from the standpoint of operating principles, a vision of fairness? Parents are only as happy as their most unhappy child. And it's very important to have a way to create fairness and equity. And that might involve shares, voting rights, dividends for some family members, and not for others. For some, it might involve a cash distribution and a recap and taking care of one family member who absolutely should not be in the business because maybe they don't come prepared or they're not able to, or maybe they're wrestling with something else and the dynamic is toxic to the second generation of leadership, right? And sometimes the right thing to do is to thank you very much and pay them out for their ownership. But a set of documents is going to need to really be flexible. So.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Of course.
Fernando?
Yes, Fred.
Just a comment, if you don't mind. One of the things that I think is, I don't want people here to feel like, well, dividends and all these big money things or whatnot, we're just a small business. And maybe we'll never be a business that has those kind of issues. But I think what's really important for everybody to know is that, every family has governance issues with themselves, with their employees and whatever. But it's really important that, even though, you've got to begin to establish a way where the family can sit down, at least once a month, maybe more, once a week, maybe at the dinner table if you're still, all together or somewhere else. But basically, I'd call a more formal meeting where you sit and you talk about, well, how are you doing, and talk about, and be really honest. Well, I'm doing okay, or I'm not doing well, or I need some help in this area, whatever. And then you begin to help each other out and to talk about these issues. That's the most important thing to begin with, is just learn how to communicate with each other. Mm-hmm. Even though you don't have the formal training, you're not a big business. It's probably, it's really important that you start to build a way of communicating with each other that will only get better as the business grows. So take the time to think, and there's lots of books on family business. You can go to Google and Google family business books. Some of them are really simple. Some of them are really too big, so to speak, and complex. But I just I want to make sure that people that are just starting businesses know that there are opportunities from the very beginning to begin this process of creating governance.
And to piggyback off of what you said, Dad, is sometimes, everyone that's here typically they care enough, and it usually takes one family member in a large family business to fall on the sword or swallow their pride to kind of initiate it. Mm-hmm. And if you're not that person, recognize who that person may be. And like Dad said, just starting off with simple conversations as you grow and you are more successful, just having that constant dialogue will be easier conflict resolution, sharing, creating more empathy. But that person, if it is you, which is a good chance that it is if you are going to, extra, industry events, you're looking at educating yourself on how to improve it, is those are the type of things that you may never be recognized for, but that's where that has to be an intrinsic motivation for you, because if it's not, you don't expect to get for them to write songs about you for doing this. And so that could be one of the most important things in the business life cycle that never gets any credit. But that's something that's an intrinsic motivation, but you might have to swallow your pride to be able to allow that to work.
Matthew, I really like what you're getting at, and there are unsung heroes in every family, right? That are thinking about the family legacy. They're thinking about the business, and they're thinking down the line, and they're tucking their ego and checking it at the door, which is absolutely essential. And one of the things, Fred, that you said is, it's not too early to start. Families have to practice how to be together and how to communicate. If you think about children who are in grade school and then high school and then college, if they do go to college, they're really, really busy, and they are very individualized typically in their pursuits as teenagers, right? They're going to school, they might do sports, they might do extracurricular stuff, and it's not until their 20s that suddenly they're faced with the idea of having to work together to solve something that might be complicated, and they haven't had a lot of practice doing that. And that, they come back and really get to know one another as adults in their mid-20s, and holy cow, there's this thing called a board, and a board meeting they have to sit in, and they've never really, again, worked towards something together to problem solve, where the stakes are very, very high, right? So this is all worthy of getting the right kind of help and counsel and practicing, as Fred was getting at. Yeah. Terry, were you going to say something or ask something?
I was just going to say Matthew's point is, and Fred is well taken, in that you have to sometimes take a risk. That's part of leadership. And it is risky to create those dialogues, maybe with a sibling or with a cousin or whomever it is, or even a key employee. And I think taking that risk is essential in order for the legacy to last. And maybe even the vision of, okay, in 20 years, we're going to be selling, and anticipating what does that look like? Who might be, or what kind of company, visioning it rather than just trying to get through today. That risk of even saying out loud, maybe we will sell at some point. What does that look like? Right. So good points, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. You're getting at something that is one of the newest, I'd say most essential, talked about elements of leadership, and that is vulnerability, right? And families do need to be vulnerable with one another. Senior management needs to show up in a way that is authentic, and it doesn't mean that it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength to actually, put some vulnerability on the table, particularly in front of other family members and also in front of employees, because it creates that trust. It creates the backdrop of empathy and compassion, particularly when things are hard. And it makes people want to hang in there and really work like hell to get something done. So thank you for that question, that comment. Great. Any other questions or comments? Well, this has been really, really great. Fernando, thank you again for inviting me to come and talk. It's very exciting, these topics, and I obviously care a lot about them. And I'm looking forward to the next few sessions on trust and estate planning, as well as succession planning. So thank you. Yeah.
It is absolutely our pleasure. Thank you so much, Gail, for sharing that expertise with our members in our community. friends and students that are participating today. As you saw, some of those students are members of family businesses, and they hope to one day, take the right approach to their leadership as they assume the roles that they aspire to assume in the future. So thank you once again, folks. We will be seeing you next week at the same time on Thursday, and then the week after on a Friday. So thank you once again. If those of you that are not members, again, I invite you all to become members of the IFB, and you will get an actual email with when this will be available for future review for public consumption. We're working some approvals in the meantime, but we should be getting a response for you guys by next week. So thank you, Gail. Thank you all, and you have a wonderful week.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Yeah. All right, wonderful. It went really well. I saw, what I really liked about this is that even though we didn't have like 50 people, you had a lot more depth. So you have more people that are relevant, more individuals that are in big family businesses. In particular, that the Youngs, for example, have, they're not part of my board, and they are very active in the community. They have properties all over the Central Valley. You saw Fred Reese is one of our, he's our founder. He's one of our biggest supporters as well. He practically funds the IFB operations at this point. He started the actual endowment for the IFB with close to $125,000. And of course, we only get about 4%. So we only operate on the benefits of that 4%. Maybe we should go to Morgan Stanley and have them manage our endowment instead. But that's an average of what we get. And we're working on getting to $1 million. We're at $320,000 right now, hoping to get there eventually. So keep us in mind as you talk to your clients. Bigger places, the Central Valley it's a little different, but it is still rich with a lot of good companies that I think are going to play a big role in the upcoming years as we see farming becoming more of a central asset.
Agriculture just becomes really, really essential. I mean, we have to take care of our food sources. We have to be confident. We have to, manage around, water and be confident in our sources, and the drought that, that we've had for, a decade or more, right? Punctuated with rain in between, right? I was really struck by Fred and Matthew, and wow, what a thoughtful father and son. And Brandon had great perspectives as well. And Sam is the consultant that you've worked with, is that right?
Right, he is our chair of the board, and he's been a wonderful partner. I think he's more in a passive mode right now as far as a consulting. So I don't believe he is actively working. He's retiring pretty much, but he does sit on a couple of boards, if I'm not mistaken. Well, one of them is the Green Industry Hall of Fame. It's a nonprofit that he started, recognizing environmental efforts that are helping our environment through green industry efforts. And he also sits on one of the, if I'm not mistaken, Sunnyland Mills, which is a producer of bulgur wheat, the biggest producer in the U.S. So that's, I think, his retirement is just advising us at the IFB and a couple of boards that he serves. And wonderful person, good human being.
Wow. That's incredible. were there other family members? Seemed like there was such great perspective in the room.
Yes, for example, Lorraine Salazar, who is, I didn't get to introduce her because she joined. And by the way, some of the people that were leaving, they were sending me messages saying, sorry, I have to leave, but I'm going to come back next week as well. So we have Delana Farms. We had Simran has a transportation company. Her dad does.
Remind me her name.
Simran. Simran is the student. She worked with. She volunteered for a different board that I volunteer for, and I kind of, I've learned that she had a family business, and then I just, stole her.
Nice.
Because she is so impressive. That young woman is so impressive with her style of management, and you saw her seriousness as a student, and so I'm hoping that she'll take the challenge of taking the leadership of our association that we just started last year in the middle of the pandemic, the student association side of this. And nothing is more fulfilling than seeing them, assume or grow into their or mature in their learning as students. And
Absolutely.
Next generation is what really drives us. We also had Moses Harris from Bloom and Bloom Coffee, and then Ansel Adams Gallery, Gene Adams, which was the last one to sign off.
Okay.
We also had Jasmine Guzman from Let's Roll Fresno. I think that's like an organization. And Lorraine, I forgot to say, Lorraine Salazar is actually a board of governors. She's in our board of governors for the Fresno State Foundation. She is the chair of the Restaurant Association in California.
Wow. Okay.
And she has, if you ever come to Fresno, I love, the Mexican restaurant, Sal's Mexican has been in her family for 3 generations. So that they have a few restaurants all over the Central Valley.
Is she with Delana Farms?
No, she is with Sal's Mexican restaurant.
Oh, with Sal's. Okay. And I'm sorry, who's the Delana connection?
Yeah, Lisa Delana is with Delana Farms.
Oh, okay.
And she's not an official member, but she comes often to follow. And so what I've learned from those that are affiliated with us on and off, like they attend because they're interested in learning, right? They actually want to, it's an hour of their time that they get to sit down and especially in Zoom, like in the middle of the summer.
Right. Yeah. What a treat, right?
Right.
Yeah. Nice.
I wish there were more people though, like that, a lot of them are board members. You saw the board members that I recognize, they're also part of family businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course you saw, Terry already, right? Is she
yes, I do. Jeff introduced me to her a few years ago. It was nice to see her.
Yeah, she joined our board recently.
Oh, good.
So yeah, we're excited to have her as well.
Wonderful.
You should think about it too, Gail. And that way you have a direct connection. And we meet about 5 times a year.
Okay.
And so I'm always looking for, to be honest, I have this hidden agenda. There were so many men in my board. I have 4 sisters. So I was raised very differently, and so when I get in and I see just a bunch of men everywhere, then I really worked on making sure that our board was a little more diverse and more with women, right?
Yeah.
Which I think it's something that affects most family businesses. Like, how come I'm not? So you'll learn that Fred, for example's CEO, or the company CEO is his daughter. So that's a good, in my mind, I'm like, okay, you see there's a guy that's Hispanic. Typically the guy is, I was raised in a family that always assumed that I was the one in charge per se, like in some of the choices, like really privileged in that regard on the male-female side.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've learned that that's not,
not necessarily.
kind of rebelled against it, right? And so it's always to see the other side.
What is Matthew's sister's name?
Kim.
And
Kim,
she wasn't there today, right?
She could not make it. She sent her, she sent me an email saying she couldn't make it, but she's very active with Fresno State in particular, and so she's on our council for advancement, and so she's very, very active, and she's very connected with Ag One, which is another organization we have at Fresno State that supports ag businesses specifically.
Great. Well, wonderful. Well, gosh, you know what I was struck by, you know, is that there's so much knowledge and insight, you know, right inside, you know, the room, right, and all the folks who spoke, and hopefully that approach worked well, right, where rather than me kind of just talk at everybody for an hour, right, everybody talked to one another, and gave their perspective, and you know, my goal was to just kind of populate it with a few questions and some insights at the end, and then just a minimal amount of content, you know, to kind of wrap things up. So hopefully that was the right number of slides, not too much, but just kind of a recap. Yeah. So.
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. And what I'm intending to do is I'm going to be more aggressive with my advertisement. So we use social media advertisement as well, and then direct mail. I did do three emails. It seems that the ones that work the most are the last minute ones.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
People don't like making binding decisions in advance, you know?
Especially when it's an event, they're like, yeah, I'll make it. And so you see a lot of people, I reminded everybody about 30 minutes, no, not 30 minutes, like 20 minutes in, it's like, we're almost starting. And so that kind of says, oh, you're right, I gotta be there, right?
Right.
And so,
Exactly.
so we'll continue doing that.
Okay.
And I've already shared my, the list of registrants with, so if you wanna, if you think of drafting a message, I can share it. Normally I say, let me share this with you as well. You have access to it already, but let me make sure you do.
Is this the registrants for today or next time?
Yeah, so what I've done is that I've taken, here's the message. Let me send you this list that says the seminar introduction. It also has a little email at the end, at the very end of this document. There's a thank you email. Right? Let me make this really big.
Are you going to put it up on screen or just email me?
I shared it with you via email, but let me also share it in my screen. And so something like this that I have ready.
Okay, got it.
So you know, if you have any suggestions, but I linked to your LinkedIn.
Yeah, thank you.
Coming up to family business, we're delighted to have you join us in the next 2 sessions. And then I'm also copying you on this email so that if they have questions, they can follow up with you directly, right? So
Great.
I sent this to everyone that registered, which were about, let me check how many exactly were.
Great. And just a quick little note, my email address is gail.covington@ms.
Thank you.
It said XYZ there.
Okay, thank you. So Gail.Covington at
EMS.
EMS.
No, just MS, sorry.
Oh, okay, at MS, Morgan Stanley.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So, did you get any feedback on our ability to publish this?
So I've got the request in, and I should find out in any day now. Okay, and I'll circle back.
Okay, so I can send this today, or I can wait and include the email.
Okay,
Because
got it. Yeah. So let me see if I can get the let me see if I maybe hold this up until tomorrow, and then let me see if I can just get the feedback. Okay. Yeah, because it would be nice to be able to have it be there. Okay.
Right. I think it would be nice to, so because people will go in, look at it, and then they'll say, you know what, I don't want to miss the next one.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Yes.
That's
And so then, of course, I say after that, you know, I invite you to stay connected, become a member, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then that's it. So
nice.
This.
That's so great.
So I don't ready because you know, otherwise it takes me a long time to organize myself. It's got to be all executed at once. So, okay, so I'll hold on until tomorrow.
Okay.
And then this was just kind of like my speech for today.
Well, thank you for the very nice introduction. It was very, very kind. How did the survey come back?
Excellent. Excellent. It was great. Let me see if I can.
Okay. And I know that, you know, I think it was only 2 questions, so there wasn't time for feedback if people had suggestions, but always, you know, and if you think of anything, I'm always interested in raising my game, right? You know, if there's anything from a format perspective, great. Great.
So yeah, so everybody would come back. So that's
good.
That's a win. That's a win-win.
Thank
Good
you.
numbers for us to report on. So I'm excited.
Great.
Talking about governance. So
and you know, when you talk to an audience where clearly some family members and participants are really deeply steeped in some of these issues, part of what, you know, is a little bit of a struggle with is that they might feel like that they've heard some of this before, and for others it's the first time, so that it's kind of fresh and wow, they're taking it all in, and just trying to balance, you know, and I think, you know, my approach is to invite a conversation where everybody can give a little bit, even if it's, you know, they're brand new, or the person who's really, really fluent, you know, suddenly they come and become, you know, the professor themselves, right?
Absolutely.
And hopefully, you know, and what happens if somebody believes that they already know something, but suddenly they have to explain it? Just that piece alone means that they grow in their skills. So all good. Yeah.
One thing that I'm sharing with you as well is the actual list. There is a what's the word? Like there's supposed to be a restriction on how we share this, but for purposes of communicating, I mean, as long as we don't do it like a direct, like a direct, what do you call them? Cold
spam.
Call.
Spam.
Right. Then we're okay. Like we could say a follow-up email, could be designed to say that, like and these are the people that register. Let me see how many unique IDs I have here.
Sure. Yeah.
45.
Nice.
There's 45 actual registrants.
Okay.
And you can see the information from them.
Nice. Okay. And what would you think would be an appropriate way to follow up with folks?
I think that it would be best if I do the initial email, and you may want to reply.
Okay.
Like to say thank you, and then perhaps with more resources. There you go. And so I normally do a BCC, but in this case I can do a CC.
Yeah, great.
And then you can reply to my email. So you can see with the language already, you can see the list. And so you can see whether they're students, faculty, or community members. Some of them are not going to be in here with their information, right? Because if they have already if they have registered in the past, then they will not have to write this information.
I see.
or if they're not community members, like if there's, like this gentleman's a faculty member.
Yep.
So then I don't ask the question like, are you an IFB? Let me see about this person right here. Hassan. So I guess he was a faculty student community. I don't know, like I guess they register under all of them. So I gotta check my programming, my robot. And so now we have Wendy Gonzalez meeting us. I don't know if that's, oh yeah, she was, I guess she's an hour late. Hi, Wendy.
She's a what?
It's one of the attendees that register, a community member as well. She just joined us. Hi, Wendy.
Wendy, you said?
Wendy, you're muted.
Oh. Okay.
Wendy, I don't know if you can hear us, but we actually just finished our presentation, but we're gonna have a session next week at the same time, which is 3 o'clock Pacific time.
Maybe.
Oh, there's a chat. Okay. No problem. So so we'll see you then next week. Sorry we missed you. We're gonna try to keep our recording. We'll let you know by tomorrow. Okay, perfect.
Great. All right.
So Wendy is a first attendee.
Oh,
So I don't believe I know Wendy. So
first time.
anyway, it's just a matter of going through the list again and going and understanding who's who.
Yeah. Great.
Okay. Well, Gail, I hope that this was productive for you. Thank you once again.
Yes, absolutely. No, that was really fun and interesting, and I love it. You know, when I learn as well, and I value being always a student and learning from families who are, you know, really in the thick of it, and look forward to kind of our next couple of sessions. So thank you.
Wonderful, Gail. We'll see you then next week. Let me know if I can do anything in between,
Okay.
especially if you know the answer by tomorrow. No, I think Monday would be probably the latest that I would want to send it.
Absolutely.
So that there you go. Thank you so much, Gail. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. All right. Bye now.
Bye-bye.